Hi, my name is Louis Cologne. I'm a S6K senior researcher. I have a column there called Shadows of the Octopus.
My name is Fleur DeSalle. I'm a performance artist, and I have a strong interest in New York City demographic statistics.
And my name is Lisa Politi, and I had the misfortune of standing in front of the towers when they were hit on 9/11, and then went to work down there for the next 9 months for the first Red Cross and then Salvation Army.
Let's start off with Louis, and there's basically a kind of official story of like what happened. Could you go through exactly what the official story is, and then kind of hit, I believe, what you would think is like the biggest...
19 hijackers with box cutters hijacked 4 planes. Obviously, everyone knows the story. 2 hit the Twin Towers, 1 hit the Pentagon, and 1 crashed over Pennsylvania. Osama bin Laden supposedly directed this operation from a cave in Afghanistan with a supercomputer, and we had to go to war to defend our freedoms against terrorists all over the world. 3 of the biggest anomalies for me is, first of all, World Trade Center number 7. A lot of people are familiar with the 2 towers coming down because of airliners hitting them and the fire, the damage. But a lot of people are not familiar with the 3rd building that went down that day. At about 5 p.m., a 3rd building collapsed, a 47-story skyscraper because of fire. This building wasn't hit by any airplane. This building had very small fires on the 7th floor and 12th floor, I think it was. But for some unexplained reason, for the first time in history, a steel building collapsed because of fires. There's been buildings that burned for 24 hours, and never in the history of high-rise building has any building collapsed because of fire. That day we had 3. World Trade Center Building 7, for no apparent reason, just collapsed. The FEMA report tells us that World Trade Center 7 collapsed, possibly because of fire, although that has a low probability of occurrence. Basically, they didn't know why. They didn't study any of the debris because the debris was quickly removed, shipped off to China. So what happened in World Trade Center 7? There's a documentary called America Rebuilds by PBS. You can get it in your local Blockbuster. In it, Larry Silverstein, the owner of World Trade Center 7, he's asked about World Trade Center 7. And he quotes, I'm going to paraphrase, I don't remember the quote exactly, but he paraphrases, says something to the point that we had so much loss of life that day that we made the decision to pull the building. So we pulled the building, we watched it collapse. Now, the interesting part about it is that to pull the building is an industry term for controlled demolition. So what Larry Silverstein was saying in public testimony was that him and the fire department made a conscious decision to control demolition of the building, to collapse it. The interesting part about that is that for you to do that, any controlled demolition company will tell you, go on any site, call any controlled demolition company, it takes at least 2 weeks to a month to study the structural points of a building to do a controlled demolition. So on September 11th, Larry Silverstein and the New York City Fire Department did an incredible feat. In a matter of hours, while 2 towers are collapsing, somehow they set up explosives in World Trade Center Building 7 and collapsed it. How did that happen? That's one anomaly. Another big anomaly for me is just who were the hijackers. You have the 19 hijackers. The FBI within hours gives us the list of the 19 hijackers. The identities, we're convinced this is them. Well, no. 7 of the hijackers have showed up alive. It's been reported in mainstream news articles, BBC. A lot of these hijackers went to their embassies in Saudi Arabia and said, I'm alive, what's going on? The FBI never updated these lists. The FBI never changed who the hijackers were. If it wasn't these men, if it was stolen identities, who were they? The myth went on so far that the 9/11 Commission report, the official report of 9/11, still has the same 19, with 7 of them being alive. If the 19 hijackers are alive, if any of them, 7 of them are alive, then the official story is false. If this weren't the men, who were the men? That's another big anomaly for me. And the third one for me would be exactly what hit the Pentagon. A lot of people say that skeptics of 9/11 say that no plane hit the Pentagon. That's not what we say. We don't say any plane hit the Pentagon. We say a 757 didn't hit the Pentagon. The physical evidence that was at the Pentagon the day of the crash isn't consistent with a 757. No luggage, no wings, no fuselage, no engines, no bodies, no anything. So what exactly hit the Pentagon? What made a hole 12 foot in diameter? The 757 would have made a much bigger impact hole. Where was the rest of the 757? How did it get through the air defense system? How did Hani Hanjour, a pilot who they said was incompetent, his own instructor at the flight school, pull off an incredible maneuver, passes the Pentagon, flips the airplane around 360 degrees, comes down at 400 miles an hour, has a plate 20 feet above the ground, and crashes into the Pentagon. Incompetent pilot, incredible maneuvers. Those three anomalies are three of the biggest ones for me as to why the official story just doesn't add up.
Why do you think that that story has stuck so much, even with, if you were to consider the Osama bin Laden deal? Is the idea that if you ask your average person, oh, great, you're your average person. Can I just ask you a question real quick? Who do you believe orchestrated the 9/11 attacks?
Fundamentalists.
That's how you understood it. Fundamentalists from where?
Not inside of the U.S. borders.
But there's no like. Have you heard that Osama bin Laden has that been the thing that you've heard, or what have you heard?
Well, I don't know Osama. I don't know anyone who's on the plane, so I can't make my own. I turn off the TV. I read the papers, but the information that's out there comes in so many different ways that so many different platforms that it's in my opinion it's almost all unreliable.
Do you know that if you go to the FBI's own website, the bulletin for Osama bin Laden focuses on attacks to U.S. embassies in 1998, but it doesn't say anything about the World Trade Center.
In that case, the FBI, that data seems to be really poor data because it's aligned with an administration who we know for a fact that administration is actually aligned with some malicious people who have expressed malicious intent to the U.S. So it's not exactly accurate. A lot of the other data that's circulating out in the public, but that data, that's completely flawed, in my opinion. I wouldn't trust that. I wouldn't FBI.gov. That's just not a reliable source.
What about the Library of Congress?
I would say that would have to be pretty skewed as well, because actually this would be a better person to ask that question.
Why?
Why am I a better person to ask? Because I've worked in Congress. The Library of Congress is just a collection of materials from other sources. So bottom line is that it's only as reliable as those original sources would be.
So then basically all those things that we get through the Freedom of Information Act still, even though they're official government documents, still have no sense, they very well may not be true.
Again, official government documents are documents produced by individuals, so what's written on them or what appears in the collection of information is only as good as the quality of the research behind it, and anything that's done by a human being has the potential for error.
I would say this, I'm sorry, I don't know your names, but the woman that passed me up, I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say about a lot of this, because as someone else who was downtown on that day, primary data, or you were there, no one can tell us what it was like. I can't read it in a book, I can't read it out of a magazine. I don't care how many data sets are out there. We know it was. And there's no arguing it. I can't, the Library of Congress or any blog that's out there, I don't trust any of that.
Right.
Because I don't know who wrote it, and I can't trust it.
What about the demolition teams that went in to clean it up? Would they be a good source?
I don't think, I think a person who was there would be a good source. This gentleman who's talking about Tower 7 coming, or Plane 7 coming down, and that's, I haven't seen data.
I just want to tell you, that was Larry Silverstein's comments, not mine. He was the owner.
Right, and we know that he's got an agenda. I mean, Larry's out to make money, and he's got a real economic agenda. But I don't know. Unless I'm there, I don't know, and I don't want to make judgment. But I know that when you're there, and you're watching, and you're helping, and you're filthy, and it's in your lungs, and you just carry it with you. And
Right.
so I don't know about the buildings though.
Yeah, can I show you something? All right, there was a man called William Rodriguez. He was the janitor for 20 years in the World Trade Center. He was the only one with the master key at the time for the stairwells. So he opened the stairwells for the firefighters. Firefighters went up. He went up a few trips, risking his own life to get people out. He was possibly the last man to leave the tower before it collapsed. This man became sort of like a hero. So he was in newspaper articles. He's Spanish. He visited the Congress in Puerto Rico, received an award, and he even received an award from George Bush. Okay? See him? He even received an award from George Bush. William Rodriguez, he was there. Okay? William Rodriguez's testimony is that he's working in the sub-basement. There's 7 sub-basements of the World Trade Center. He's in the 6th. That means he's really deep underground. He comes into work that day. He's late. He goes get some coffee. He goes to the building office. Into the building office runs his co-worker, the freight operator. His skin is hanging off from a fireball that exploded through the freight. Rodriguez sees his friend. He says, "What happened? What happened?" The guy says, bombs. They're going off. The freight operator. So William Rodriguez helps his friend out, and these people make their way out. The engineers in the 7th sub-basement also experience bombs. The chief engineer is walking up the stairway, and his machine room is totally demolished, gone, exploded. Now, my question to you would be, if the airplane hit on the 90-somewhat floor, what caused the explosion in the basement?
If I'm to understand correctly, you're basically making an argument that there was there's some sort of a subversive or a plot where someone like Mr. Silverstein was actually involved in this building coming down, which would predicate that this individual would have known that the planes would have been hitting the building. He would have known. Is that the assumption?
Who, Mr. Silverstein would have known?
Right. I guess I'm having a hard time making the correlation.
You said, I'm not speaking about Silverstein knowing, Silverstein not knowing. I'm telling you what Silverstein said,
right,
what happened with World Trade Center 7, and I'm telling you what William Rodriguez said, what he witnessed. Okay? I'm not putting anything together for you or telling you what happened. I'm just asking you, if William Rodriguez and the chief engineer experienced bombs in the basement, then that's first-hand testimony, yes?
Oh, absolutely. That's
okay, now let me tell you something else William Rodriguez did. William Rodriguez has filed a RICO lawsuit. You know what a RICO lawsuit is? It's racketeering, influence, corrupt organization. It was a lawsuit made to take down the mafia, because it has expansive investigative powers. Now, William Rodriguez, not only William Rodriguez, but Ellen Mariani, who's the widow of one of the men who died in one of the airplanes, also filed a RICO lawsuit against the Bush administration for complicity in the World Trade Center attack. Now, this is my question. This is the lawsuit right here. You can get it online. Okay? My question to you and to anybody is, the mainstream press hasn't said anything about it. Nobody knows about it. Why don't you know? Even if the lawsuits are false and wrong, it's great news. If I'm an editor and I'm running a news agency and I see 2 private citizens file RICO lawsuits against the President of the United States, that will be all over my front page. Why haven't you heard about it? Why is it being suppressed?
It's interesting you say that because Tony Snow, right, the guy from Fox who's now the U.S. press secretary. I mean, these people are pretty. I mean, Fox, right?
Right.
Fox. He's the voice of the president. So you're asking me why the media isn't looking at anything. Well, we can draw our own assumptions around this, right? The media is pretty messed up.
Don't we have left-based media? that is not on the Republicans' agenda,
Right, and
that is
that's,
not on the Bush
you know what
administration's
that is?
agenda, why haven't they covered it?
Those are blogs. Those are blogs, right? I mean, those are non-mainstream media where you and I can go, and if we search hard enough, instead of going just like to drudge.com, you know, we can find good media and relatively trustworthy. But at the end of the day, Library of Congress, how much can we really trust? How much can we really? I mean, I can trust a lawsuit, but I've seen some really bad lawsuits, right? I mean, you know, really, really bad. So, and I don't want to disparage, you know, someone that storyline, but how can I make a, you know, decision or a judgment as just a citizen?
Well, you can make that decision, that judgment, by researching, asking questions, and finding out, based on your own ability to weigh things out, what's false and what's not. And if you consistently come across false statements, false news items, false things about that day, September 11th, then you have to question the whole event itself.
We can all question it. I mean, we should all question it constantly. But again, unless I'm not the primary researcher or witnessing something firsthand, it's all someone else's word against someone else. And even if I think that one person is an absolute horrible human being, we all have to make, you know, I don't know her. She might be able to tell me something really powerful, and she might have seen it, but at the end of the day, why should I believe her?
Well, let's transition into the idea of somebody who was actually there. But just so we're clear, with secondary explosions, if you go back to the firemen's tapes, which are the most clear record of what happened in the buildings, they all talk about secondary explosions. So it's not just, and there was new tapes that were released, so you can go and listen to yourself. And if you go and listen to what the firemen said, and then you listen to what the fire marshal said in the beginning before like the whole media spin happened, listen to what happened on that day, then you'll get a first-hand opinion of explosions and stuff. Because when I did this installation last year, a lot of people walked up and down the street and called me all kinds of names because they were still all buying the whole, like, you know, they're out to get us because of our freedoms thing. The firemen that were right down the street came down and said, "Oh, thank you." Now, they would have been angry more than anybody because they left that day to go to a 9/11 celebration. I watched them go, and I watched them come back. So just so we're clear, because, like, you know, we're almost forced into believing that we can't trust anything, so then why pay attention to anything, and the only thing that matters is Brad and his spawn. So we have to get back to the idea of, we should, just like a sports team, they analyze each and every little play and it's on the news all the time. It's the same thing. We should have the same kind of zeal to know really what happened. Like, that should be the Kennedy assassination of our time. But now let's go to Lisa, sorry.
It's okay.
Because I'd really love to hear what your experience was on the ground.
Mm-hmm. I don't live that far from where the towers were. I live down in the West Village, and I was running with my dog, as I did every day, and I was on the West Side Highway. If you were down or spent time down there, right now there's a movie theater that's back up. I was standing about the towers when the towers got hit there, and it was kind of incredible. When the first plane hit, it really looked like an accident. It looked like the pilot had a heart attack, or it looked like, you know, something crazy happened, and this plane just crashed into the building, and it took many seconds, minutes for your brain to register in your head, because it was like, oh my God, that's a plane. Oh my God, that plane just hit that building. Oh my God, that was the World Trade Center. And it took time because it didn't make any sense. And then you could see debris and stuff starting to fall out of the building. And many people just stood there, and I started running towards the building. And there was this sort of sense of, oh, you have to tell somebody. I mean, clearly the entire city at the time knew what was happening, or was going to know what was happening, but there was still this, I have to do something, I have to tell something. And then 20 minutes later, from the other side, much lower, the second plane hit. And when the second plane hit, everybody was, oh my God, it's terrorism. And then things stopped. And at that point, where I was on the West Side Highway, which is about Stuyvesant High School, people started moving and evacuating out, and everybody started moving up. And I specifically remember this father who was going to be taking his kid to school grabbed a hold of both of his kids' hands, who were in an absolute panic, and they just started running up the street, and people were just moving. And so I moved up with them. And then when I got home, I was actually like, it was such shock to see it happen. And when I got home, I turned on the television just to find out what was going on. And when I had turned on the television and saw that the Pentagon got hit, that's when I got scared. I wasn't scared per se, because it wasn't making any sense until I turned on the television. And then I thought, oh my God, we're under attack, we're under attack. And then nothing was safe. So I wanted to help, so I had called the next couple of days, maybe 3 days after, 4 days after, I'd called the Red Cross to sort of see if I could go and volunteer. And how I wound up working down there, I had gotten invited, I guess is the best way to say it, because they were so slammed with so many people that were rushing to help at that point, that a friend of mine had gotten in and said, it's a madhouse here. Please come, please help. So there was a handful of friends of ours. We had sort of infiltrated the 66th Street Red Cross. And at the very beginning, we were trying to set up shelters and calling around to try and get people. And I spent several days getting people, housing, and trying to get people that were transplanted from ground zero into some sort of temporary housing. And that was really hard. I did that for a couple of days, and then someone at the Red Cross said, oh, you're really good on the phone. Can you answer our disaster hotline? Which was, for me, the most horrendous job that I could have possibly done, because they had moved me from upstairs to downstairs into a phone bank. And I had no training for this. I mean, nobody has any training for this. But I was literally on the other end of the phone with people that were calling from overseas. I can't find my kid. Has anybody who has this is like maybe day 7, something like that. Has anybody seen my kid? So I was answering. I felt so incredibly hopeless and helpless and lost, and there was just absolutely no answers. And so the Red Cross, in addition to dealing with all the 9/11 stuff, was getting the stuff the Red Cross normally has to deal with: fires, things that are anything else that the Red Cross would come and take care of. I was answering those calls also, blood calls. Some of the ones that stay in your head are the most crazy calls. I mean, someone had called up and wanted to know if the Red Cross was going to pay for his blood if he donated blood. You're just like, what? But for me, one of the most horrendous calls was that I had gotten a call from a homeless shelter down on Chambers Street, and they had called up and said that in addition to having all these homeless people to deal with that were already homeless, and that nobody was helping to help them help the homeless. It was a really huge issue, actually, was when we were staffing shelters, was all these people that were homeless already were moving into the shelters, and that was like a huge thing, because these people are already homeless. Why are they in our shelters? And it was not good. I got a call from a downtown place on Chambers Street, and they were in absolute. The guy on the phone was pleading with us to send somebody down to help him, and there was nobody to send. And that was the most horrendous thing, was that there's no training for anything like that, and the task forces and the psychiatrists and the teams that were going down, as much as they wanted to help, it was so chaotic. There was absolutely no way for anybody to do anything. Cut to a couple days later, they had said they were going to start doing door-to-door checks for the elderly that were down there that could not or did not get out of their buildings, the invalid. So there was a perimeter set up, and we went door-to-door and checked on people to make sure that they had their medicine and to make sure that there was enough food. And that, for me, was 3 million times better than answering that hotline phone, because that hotline phone was killing me. Right after that, they said they were going to be opening up a respite center, and did I want to go and work in the respite center? And the respite center originally was in St. John's University, and I said, yeah, I would really like to do that. So I was down there and the Red Cross was running that at the time, and that for me was amazing, because you were anybody that was working down there at the time. That's where you went, and it was essentially the job was to feed people and clean people up, but I met some tremendous people, and for me, I mean, I consider, and I'm so interested to hear what Louis is saying, and I'm going to be interested to hear what Fleur is saying. But for me, what I took from my experience down at 9/11, and I worked down there for 9 months, the first 4 months with the Red Cross, and then they got closed, and Salvation Army was the next group, the only other group that you could work with and stay down there, which is a whole other, we'll talk about that soon, I'm sure. I'm sure what that was like. But for me, the thing that I take from my experience down there is the overwhelming sense of humanity and the overwhelming sense of people and heroicism that you could not, I mean, I have goosebumps thinking about the people that I worked with down there. And my own personal heroes were morgue workers who never, ever, ever got any sort of thanks, and the work that they did was tremendous. I had the very good fortune of spending some time with those guys, and man, they just would make me weep because they were so unsung. The construction guys, the sanitation workers were incredible, incredible people. I mean, when I say that no one had training to be down there, no one had training to be down there. The guys that worked for Verizon and this, CWA workers and the stuff that they were uncovering, and there was no place for them to unload what they were taking in, like physically taking into their bodies and their minds, and just this look of absolute shock and stun when they would come in off of at the time it was the pile, and it was on fire for months. That thing was on fire until the middle of December. And I remember a day in, God, the very beginning of, the end of November actually, I think it was, when they came in and they were excited because the inside of the pile was down to 2,000 degrees. And they knew that was going to be good because soon they would be able, I mean, they had to, when they were lifting the stuff off, it was still literally on fire. And it was for a really long time. So the small victories that was actually a huge victory that day. The small victories that were down there were things that you just couldn't wrap your head around. So, do you want me to keep going?
Please.
If anybody else wants to jump in, or?
Well, I mean, to me, the issue around what happened that day seems to have been, seems to overshadow the idea of all the things that you're talking about. And then the idea of the heroism of all the
regular people,
workers, then I think was used or has seemed to have taken the place of people talking about why FEMA didn't do their job.
Right.
And why the EPA didn't do their job. And so what kind of help did you get from FEMA, or what did you see from FEMA when you were there?
Well, the FEMA trailers were right down, well, they had several of them at the beginning. I mean, it depends. The overall period of 9 months, things moved a lot. It went from being inside St. John's University to that we called the Taj Mahal at the time. It was that gigantic white bubble that was across the street. Right now, it's a parking lot now, and there's a hotel there. But so it depends on what period you're talking about of where FEMA was and where the EPA was. And I mean, to your point about the Library of Congress is only as good as the information that they get. I mean, a lot of those guys from FEMA were just regular guys taking testings, testing water, and they were just regular people. And we would, believe me, we knew FEMA was there. Everybody was leaping onto FEMA, going, "What's going on? What's going on? Are my lungs going to be dead in a couple of years? What am I breathing? And those guys, their response was, "We live here too. We want," where this information is gone, I don't know, but asking the people that were down there at the time, they all said, "I have family that lives in this building as well. I'm from New York City, or I'm from New Jersey, or they wanted to get to the truth as well. There was not inside, and I maybe have a very privileged experience down there just because I was working with the people that were down there. There was not this conspiracy theory from where we were sitting at all. There was, everybody was down there trying to do the best they possibly could have done at the time. Where this information is gone and where the reports are gone, I don't know. But at the time when everyone was down there, they were really doing, and I have to believe they were really doing their best when they were down there because, I was down there with them and asked them. If you want to discuss things about the things for me that were atrocities were there were not the masks that people, those masks that people wear. There were no masks for women. So they designed these masks for men, these gigunda masks that would fall off of our faces. You know, we didn't wear them inside of the buildings, and you know, the hats, the hard hats, were not designed to fit on our heads properly. So there was a lot of issues like that, or if you were a small person, those masks were useless because they wouldn't fit. And to be honest, everybody that worked down there, nobody wore them anyway because they were uncomfortable. You couldn't hear in them, you couldn't see in them. So on the days when you were working, I mean, and it was so damn hot when you were working on that pile, they didn't wear them. So whatever sort of affects the thing that made a lot of people crazy down there was that they did have equipment that would have worked. They did have stuff that would definitely. There was equipment that was made for women. There was equipment. I mean, friends of mine. There was World Trade Center relief on Spring Street. We set up the Spring Street warehouse, and one of the things that they were incredibly successful at doing were the firemen. Everybody's heroes. I mean, the unarguable heroes of 9/11 and the long term after didn't have proper equipment. It wasn't until the Spring Street warehouse got in and they raised thousands and thousands of dollars, and they were the ones that were actually outfitting the firemen with proper equipment. I mean, that's horrible. That for me is unforgivable, that sort of thing.
See, it's very interesting because now when we look back at that time, if you were to look at what was in the media reports, it was George Bush going down and saying that we're gonna give everything that we need, anything that they need, they got it. Billions of dollars had already been given. All the money there were already been overruns in the Red Cross, so everybody thought they got plenty of money.
Right.
Why
well,
wouldn't they have?
That first Christmas, I mean, and I can speak to this too. Nobody had money down there. There was no money down there. I mean, the firemen were borrowing money from each other to buy their kids presents, Christmas presents that year. So the millions and millions of dollars that was collected did not get to the people that actually really needed it. And then a lot of people were incredibly proud and didn't want to take. And I'm going to give a quick plug to firemen, who I really think are some of the most incredible people that I have ever met, as well as policemen. But one of the amazing things about the firemen, and to this day I have such amazing respect for them, is it really is true. People say this, that their job was, the rest of us were running out, they were running in. They were always, always, always the first ones down there. They were always the ones doing. Some of the fathers that had lost their sons were 60, 70 years old and were back digging around in dirt for forever. I mean, trying to find pieces of somebody's finger. I mean, the things that small cheers would go up inside of the tent or the bubble when something was found, and for a long, long time nothing was found, or things were found and it was hard.
Wow, that sounds. I mean, it's.
You're shaking your head. Yeah, you were there too, weren't you? Yeah, it's.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And this, not to take out the floor, but
No, go.
This is the right thing, because just like Spielberg has done, there's a whole culture in this world that doesn't believe the Holocaust happened. And their pictures, we all know it happened.
Yeah.
And there's a large disbelief culture, and things like this, where you take videos, you document someone, you look in the face, you say to someone, it happened, I was there, I know what happened, I felt it, I was a part of it. You can't change that.
Yeah.
And then when you do that, you keep documenting it over video. People are going to be watching you for whether you realize it in 2050.
Well,
that's what's most important, because there's always going to be someone out there who doesn't believe in the written word.
When Darryl asked me to do this, I had really mixed feelings about doing this. I thought, because it is something, for me, it's painful for me to sit up here and talk about this. I mean, it's incredible, and I mean, the reason I'm doing it is because this kind of stuff needs to be told. I mean, they're not, the people that were working down there are not, many things are said about the Red Cross, and I can't speak at all to the administrative level of the Red Cross. What I can speak about are those volunteers that showed up from around the country, and those people are incredible. I mean, yes, certainly there were some jackasses that come in, like there are jackasses that come in everywhere. And they were a lot of people that originally, when they came in, were going to come in and save us, and they came in with completely the wrong attitude, some of the people that were down there, because not realizing that this was our home and we lived here, that changed quickly. Because a much larger sensitive issue, and people had a lot more sensitivity with working with people that were down there and had continued to stay. Differently than when the Salvation Army came in, was a very, very different organization and operation, because the Salvation Army is an army of God. And that's how they, I'm not making that up, that's how they call themselves an army of God. That made me and many other people very angry that the city of New York would allow a religious organization to run a place where people needed to be taken care of. To the point of where there was religious Christian savior paraphernalia on all of the tables, on all the food tables when people would come in. There were signs in the back saying, be careful about proselytizing and preaching. There was daily prayers. That was really uncomfortable for somebody like myself who's not Christian, and for many, many other people down there that may be Jewish or Islamic or whatever. It was a very different element, and it was not as open. And they were down there for a really long time. They started right after Christmas. They started right before Christmas they started. And then they were the ones that worked throughout. When the center closed at the end of May, they were the ones that were running the show. And that was a really much more difficult time to be working down there, because you were not only working under such conditions, you then had to work in such conditions with religious, a lot of fanatics. And they really were, and that was really hard.
Well, the one thing, I just had to respond to the one thing real quick. I just wanted to respond because when you said that, of course, there's also people who deny the Holocaust. Oddly enough, the third day I had this installation up, I was putting up a document that was from Milt Bearden. And Milt Bearden was the person, the CIA director that trained the Mujahideen that would become Al-Qaeda. I was showing somebody the document. They looked at the document and they read it, and they said, there's people who deny the Holocaust. This stuff doesn't matter. And I said, this guy was the person who trained them. If you don't know his name, if you don't know who Sibel Edmonds is, do you know who Sibel Edmonds is? She was the FBI agent. She was brought in to go analyze the data, so that way they could find out what reports were what, and she could translate. She goes through the data. She starts to find anomalies all over the place. So she reports up the chain. She gets bumped down, pat on the head a few times. She didn't get fired until later. She got fired, and then Ashcroft put a gag order on her. She said, now this is, again, a first-hand person. If they release the gag order on her, that there are people, high-level people in government, that will go to jail. Now, this is an FBI agent that has spent her whole life doing this and ran out on a limb to just tell the truth. Now, I know that because since we pay attention to documents all the time, there's always you can't trust documents. If I'm led to believe that I can't trust documents, and if I can't trust documents, which is what was just said, I can't trust the government because the government is lied. You can't trust her. So then, where do I live? And what's the difference between living here in a democratic society that has open documents, or whether we just live in some place that has no documentation, and they say, well, you can't believe it anyway, so don't pay attention to it at all. It's like, then how am I supposed to know where I live?
You don't know. You don't know. And I trust her, and I can trust the Spielberg's video archive of Holocaust survivors, because I can see it in their eyes. I can see that. And I'll trust the firemen that I know when I see it in their eyes, and I see the pain when the Star Spangled Banner or anything that's patriotic, anything that happens, the emotions that I feel and they feel, that's what I trust.
So you, excuse me, Darryl. So you trust anything that matches your worldview?
I trust the human connection.
Okay, so the human connection, the firefighters who you say you trust, says there was bombs in the building. The firefighters. The FBI agent, first-hand account, FBI agent says if the government allows her to speak, high-level people in the government will go to jail over 9/11.
Let's just one step, which would be, you're saying that to me right now. If a fireman said that to me, So you understand? Like, I believe what you're saying, that fireman said it. What I'm saying is...
You can hear the tapes online yourself.
And that's what I'm listening to.
All I was going to say is, I think the answer to your question about what's the difference is that at some point you have to stop reading no matter where you are. This country gives you the opportunity, if you're willing to take it, to stop reading and actually do something. In other words, if you are concerned enough about what the government is doing, you're not prohibited from participating in government. So you can stop reading. You can go to the hearings. You can go to the meetings. You can run for office. Things you cannot do in countries that are not democratic societies. And I think too few people are willing to get off the couch and turn off the TV or stop reading the paper and actually go sit in and watch and experience it firsthand. To me, that's the difference. Like, we can sit here and we can do these kinds of events or we can read the paper, but if we're not willing to get off our asses and actually go do something, you know what, we kind of are going to be stuck with what it is.
You get what you settle for.
Right, well, but, I mean, like, you know, to me, this was getting off my ass. Like, in other words, it was me making sure that people could have this dialogue. It was the idea that, like, you know, like, the idea you can run for government, you can do all this thing. I'll have to say it because, I mean, I am a black activist. And, like, I work in Bed-Stuy. And, like, you know, the things that you see, and when people apply themselves, it's not always equal, like, okay, you apply yourself thusly, it all works, and, you know, everybody, it's a benign system that is out for good and greatness. Because, I mean, it wasn't until 1999 that they admitted in government that they had a hand in assassinating Martin Luther King. So this was only after people fought and fought and fought. It wasn't, they fought with the documents. And it was the documents that get people out of jail because the government lied, and on and on and on. So I'm not so quick to just dismiss the documents and say, well, I'm just quick, because not everybody around the world that gets their opinion about what exactly happened is not going to be able to go to that fireman. As a matter of fact, that fireman very well might not be able to say anything.
The fire department is under gag order by the FBI. They can't speak about what happened in the house that day.
But to the point about this issue getting off your ass, I applaud you for that. The question is, how many people who've walked by today are going to get off their asses because of something they saw? And my guess is not that many, right? They're going to keep walking. And
But I got to tell you that since we've had the installation, plenty of people have come to the website, plenty of people have emailed me and said thank you very much, plenty of people have walked by and had tons of conversations with people. You know, it's not just, to me, it's not a zero-sum game of, okay, everybody has to pay attention. If I can just spark, just from people walking by, and people go, well, what was that thing? And then they come back later, because it's a corporate area, and I know that, like, you know, I work in these buildings, so I know that people are going to come by, they're going to come back, and they go, oh, hey, wait a minute, I never read this before, or I never saw that. Now, of course, you can say that, like, you know, well, you can't believe anything you read, you can't believe anything you hear, you can't really believe anything, so as long as your life is going great, then you can just not pay attention, or pay attention, like New York Times. The New York Times is not going to tell you everything that it's not all the news you need to read. I mean, there are core sources of finding the information. Now, of course, yeah, okay, so we can't trust the Library of Congress. But if I live in a democratic society and I have to believe that at least the people are not intentionally just lying to me and trying to feed me a line of crap, then I have to be able to trust the core documents, the operational documentation that's created. Or I have to be able to trust part of it, because then why else is it produced? And it is illegal to produce illegal documentation. So then I guess I want to get to, because I want to get to the floor, but that's kind of our quandary, because every time you dig through the data, it never matches what you're being told, and what you're being told always evolves over the period, over the course of years, and then all of a sudden you start to find out, wait a minute, you know, okay, it wasn't right, but the documentation was the thing that brought, but the documentation, but hold on a second, the documentation was what the thing that brought out after the first Gulf War, when they said that the smart bombs were 100% accurate and 90% accurate, and then all of a sudden, it was the documentation where they had said, the documentation had said from the beginning that they were less than 30% accurate. But the official story kept saying accurate, 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 accurate. The documentation was right. You know, there were generals and high-level people and admirals. It wasn't just like, you know, some low-level person just saying that what their opinion was.
I guess again, you know, I'm struck because the Library of Congress is literally just a repository for documents. So when we talk about trusting the Library of Congress is a building. The question is, can we trust the work products done by people who are in government? I think sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Where the real issue for me is that the vast majority of people who report the news and report on this information don't understand it themselves.
True.
And so if you have information being produced by the government or by private companies or by interest groups or whatever that is misunderstood by the media, when was the last time you heard someone on CNN or Fox News say, hey, you know that story we reported 3 hours ago? Yeah, we kind of got it wrong. Here's the real story. They never do that, right? So the bottom line is, I think what he just said about you don't stop asking the questions, you don't stop looking for the information, and you don't assume that what you read or what you hear in one single source is going to be accurate, but you keep looking for more and more evidence to build a case for yourself about what's actually true.
Absolutely.
That gag order, the firemen don't just talk to me because I'm their friend. Eventually, in 10, 15 years, they're going to wake up and they're going to start talking. The only thing that matters is we don't stop asking questions.
That's as a matter of fact, in the 9/11 congressional report, not the final commission report, the 9/11 congressional report, there was 28 pages blacked out of foreign governments assisting the hijackers, and that's what Bob Graham said. Oh, we'll eventually know that 20, 30 years from now. Just like we were eventually supposed to know who was behind the Kennedy assassination, which in '79, the House Select Committee on Assassination said there was a conspiracy. Justice Department, you investigated. Justice Department didn't do anything. So eventually, at some point, I'm going to keep my young son, he's 5 months old, I'm going to keep him nice and healthy, keep him away from all the bad stuff. And so at some point, he can live to be an old age and eventually find out what happened to Kennedy. Eventually find out who was, out of those 28 pages that were blacked out in the congressional report.
And as long as you take care of your son, and as long as those of us who lost a lot of friends on that day, as long as we don't ever forget those people, as long as we don't ever stop asking questions, and we drive people in power absolutely up the wall, just telling them that there's something wrong here, I want an answer. How come I can't hang out with my buddy anymore and go for beers? How come we can't go for jogs anymore? How come I don't have that friendship anymore? We just don't ever forget them. You keep asking. And either eventually you get your answer and you get clarity, or you come to terms with yourself with some peace that people out there are just bad. You know, some people out there are just, you have to deal with it. You have to go on with your life, but you never forget. You just never forget. And that's the, thank you.
Thank you.
Fleur. She's like, after that, all right. Well, there seems to have been a lot of mood quote shakeout out of the whole downtown area, and specifically the Ground Zero region. We're at 55 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back right after the break, and then we're going to go straight to you, and then we're going to discuss a lot of that. So thanks a lot. That was section 1 of the SSK 9/11 panel.